Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we are tackling a massive, fascinating theological puzzle. If you recently listened to episode 227 of the 5-Minute Debate, you know the topic was the nature of Christ's atonement. It's a heavy subject for sure, and let's be honest, in just 5 minutes, they could barely scratch the surface. So consider this explainer your official companion guide. We're going to unpack the source material behind that debate, map out the actual arguments, and see if we can solve a mystery that has quite literally resulted in centuries of theological arm wrestling. Okay, let's dive into this. The central mystery we are looking at today is whether the two major views presented in that debate, penal substitution and Christus Victor, are actually sworn enemies. Are they mutually exclusive? Or is it possible they can coexist in perfect harmony? You know, historically, we've often been told we have to choose one over the other. But today, we're going to see if there's a way to beautifully synthesize them.
Here is our roadmap for today. First up, we'll look at the atonement debate itself. Second, the cosmic geography backstory. Third, the substitutionary cross. Fourth, the victorious resurrection. And finally, a theological kaleidoscope.
Section 1. The Atonement Debate. Two Views of the Cross.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact divide we heard in our source debate. We heard two very distinct views. On the left side, we have Dr. Smith representing penal substitution. The sources explain that humanity, as sinners, referencing Romans 3:23, stands directly under God's righteous judgment. But divine love provided Jesus, who willingly laid down his life, according to John 10:18, to be the ultimate substitute. He bears that penalty, satisfying divine justice, perfectly aligning with Isaiah 53 and 2 Corinthians. Now, on the right side, Dr. Jones represents Christus Victor. This view heavily emphasizes Christ's ultimate triumph over sin, over death, and over supernatural evil. Like I mentioned, historically, this has been framed as a strict either-or choice. But let's see why that might just be a false dichotomy.
Section 2. The Cosmic Geography Backstory. Rewinding to the Old Testament.
Because honestly, if we only look at the New Testament to try and understand the cross, it's kind of like walking into a movie halfway through. You're missing the whole setup. We need to hit pause and rewind. To do this, we turn to the peer-reviewed academic research of Dr. Michael Heiser. Drawing on Old Testament texts, specifically Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82, his work dives deep into the ancient Israelite worldview of the divine council. And understanding this worldview is absolutely essential if we want to grasp what Jesus actually accomplished.
So, the foundational concept here is cosmic geography. According to the older manuscripts of Deuteronomy 32, a major event happened at the Tower of Babel. God judged the rebellious nations by literally disinheriting them. He divided up humankind and allotted them to lesser gods, referred to in the text as the sons of God. But crucially, God kept Israel as his own allotted heritage. Now, the source texts reveal that these lesser gods eventually became totally corrupt. They demanded worship, they abused their power. This creates a massive, overarching cosmic problem. The nations are enslaved to fallen gods, and humanity is fundamentally separated from their creator.
Let's move to and see how this builds across the entire biblical story. At Babel, as we just discussed, the nations are disinherited. Right after that, God calls Abraham, creating Israel as his own distinct portion, essentially starting over. This massive cosmic division completely sets the stage for the New Testament. The cross comes in to address the problem of human sin, but as we are going to see in a moment, the resurrection is required to actually reclaim those disinherited nations from those lesser gods.
Section 3. The Substitutionary Cross. Addressing Guilt and Justice.
Let's look really closely at how the first part of this solution works, because it completely validates Dr. Smith's position from the debate. The source material is crystal clear on this. Humanity is mortal, and humanity is sinful. Because we inherently fail to meet God's standard of perfect holiness, this moral guilt creates a very real, very tangible problem. God's justice requires satisfaction. Sin cannot simply be brushed under the rug or ignored. But God's incredible, pursuing love provided the perfect, sinless substitute to address that exact problem.
We actually see this exact substitutionary pattern established incredibly early on. Think back to step 1 in the Old Testament, the Passover lamb in Egypt. It protected the Israelites from divine judgment. The blood was a literal substitute that provided deliverance. Then we get to step 2 in the New Testament. Authors like Paul and John deliberately connect Jesus to this historical event. Christ becomes the ultimate Passover lamb. His sacrifice on the cross provides a direct, one-to-one solution for our moral guilt. As the sources emphasize, we have redemption through his blood. The substitution isn't just a metaphor, it is undeniably real.
Section 4. The victorious resurrection. Defeating the powers. But stopping at the cross leaves the story unfinished, which brings us perfectly to Dr. Jones's Christus Victor argument. Now, what's really interesting about this is a direct quote from our sources. There is no atonement without the resurrection. Period. The cross alone, acting as a payment for guilt, doesn't solve the broader cosmic geography problem we discussed earlier. Without the empty tomb, you essentially just have a dead substitute. But as Paul tells us in Romans 4, Christ was raised for our justification, our vindication. The resurrection brings the ultimate deliverance.
Just look at what the resurrection actually accomplishes on a cosmic scale. First, it defeats the Lord of the dead, Satan himself, because death simply could not hold Jesus. Second, it completely reverses the curse of Eden, offering eternal life. Third, as Colossians 2 explicitly states, it disarms the supernatural rulers and authorities, putting them to open shame. And finally, linking right back to that ancient worldview we talked about, 1 Peter 3 shows Jesus declaring victory over the imprisoned spirits. The lesser Elohim, those fallen gods of the nations, are officially stripped of their authority. The nations can finally, truly be reclaimed.
Section 5. A theological kaleidoscope. The cosmic synthesis. All of this leads us to our final, major breakthrough. What if this shouldn't even be a debate at all? Our sources argue that the atonement is actually best understood as a kaleidoscope. Think about it. If you've ever looked through a kaleidoscope, you know that just shifting the lens slightly reveals a completely different yet equally beautiful pattern. The atonement isn't just one dry mechanical transaction. It's a magnificent, multifaceted gem of grace. Both Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones are looking at the exact same incredible event. They're just looking through different facets.
So the crucial point is that the biblical authors themselves did exactly this. They looked through different facets. Take a look at this breakdown. Paul heavily emphasizes substitution and justification in his letters like Romans and 1 Corinthians. John, on the other hand, zeroes in on the Passover lamb imagery in his Gospel and Revelation. And Peter highlights the epic victory over imprisoned spirits in 1 Peter 3. They aren't contradicting each other in the slightest. They are describing the vast, comprehensive reality of what Jesus achieved, just from different angles.
When we synthesize these views, we see a complete, totally unified cosmic rescue mission. The cross directly solves the Genesis 3 problem. It cures our sin and our moral guilt through a perfect substitutionary sacrifice. Simultaneously, the resurrection solves the Genesis 11 problem. It defeats the rebellious gods of Babel and reclaims the disinherited nations for God's family through an ultimate, undeniable victory. You literally cannot have the full biblical picture without both pieces.
So as we wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. If the atonement truly is a multifaceted kaleidoscope, which facet of grace have you been missing? Have you focused so heavily on the substitute that you maybe forgot the victorious king? Or on the flip side, have you focused so much on the victory that you forgot the massive price that was paid? Thank you so much for exploring this deep theological puzzle with me today. Keep learning, keep looking through that kaleidoscope, and I will see you in the next explainer.